ni kena tinggal. Jadi kita. Bodan. Bodan.
Welcome to the beautiful Sepang International Circuit in Malaysia for a return to competition for the fantastic Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia Series. A 3-year hiatus, in fact more than 3 years since we last saw action from the beautiful Italian marque. There is the Sepang circuit on screen, 5.543 kilometres, 15 turns. And this really will test the drivers. First seen by Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia in 2012. Also saw the World Series, I think it was in 2018. It was the host nation for the end-of-year combination of the European, American and Asian Championships. Cars on track, and as you can see, it's beautiful. Yes, there's windscreen wipers on. Yes, the circuit is damp and slippery. And unfortunately for the competitors, after a more than 3-year break, they've been facing this in almost every session. Of course, it's the tropics. We come to expect that from somewhere like Malaysia. The weather suddenly turns very violent and very wet very quickly, but for a fairly short period of time. Unfortunately, it seems to be on the same time schedule as the Lamborghini Huracan Evo 2s, which of course are making their first appearance in this championship in this part of the world. Many of these cars are new cars. They are built as Evo 2s. A number of them have been converted from Evo 1s. I was talking to some of the drivers, Dan Wells included, during the earlier part of today about what the difference is. He made some interesting assessments about the way things are with the car. We'll get to those as the race goes on. 50-minute race, 2 50-minute races across both today, Saturday and tomorrow. Similar time of day, early afternoon, about the time the rain starts to fall. The drivers will certainly be looking for an opportunity to run these cars in dry conditions, because the rain hasn't hung around for too long. The track hasn't been particularly treacherous, and despite the fact that we've had a bit of rain, it did impact, well, not only practice but certainly qualifying earlier today. It hasn't really had a solid impact on the lap times. Coming into this round, the lap record for Sepang circuit for a Lamborghini Super Trofeo was a 2:04.69, set by local driver Afik Yazid back in 2019 as he battled his way through the championship along the likes of the reigning champion, Chris van der Drift, who is back behind the seat this weekend. Afik Yazid, unfortunately, isn't on track. You can see the rain falling there in those shots as the cars come to the circuit. I kind of imagine that they have been fitted with slick tyres, although just prior to the race, of course, it was declared a wet race. So the drivers have that opportunity. There's a very important man on top right of screen, Hong Sik John, who's been a big part of motorsport in this part of the world. Of course, the Hankook Asia representative, and this year, and that is one of the big changes over past seasons of the Lamborghini Super Trofeo series, is that Hankook is the control tyre supplier for this season. So there are a few new things to consider, and that was something that Dan Wells was pointing out. The car's different. It's actually an improvement on the Evo 1, of course it is. The aero's a little bit different. The brakes, he said, are just incredible. And the way that the car stops really does allow you to extend more the pace, the overall pace and a lap time for the car. Much better, of course, for the pro drivers like Dan Wells and Chris van der Drift. Not so much for the AM drivers, but there's a lot of confidence in the development of the car. Part of this circuit has been resealed. Of course, it is used regularly for MotoGP and World Superbike. So they have changed part of the circuit and resealed it somewhere around turns 5 to 9. You'll see the surface difference as we get through the vision across the course of the race. And additionally, the Hankook tyres. It was a different one-make tyre or control tyre in past seasons. So that 3-year gap, there has been a change internationally for the Lamborghini Super Trofeo series worldwide. And Hankook is now something the drivers are getting more accustomed to. So there are a number of things that are going to feature quite strongly during the course of this weekend. And whilst we talk about the lap record being a 2:04.69, during qualifying, of course, we saw some pretty stellar laps, but they were unable to break below a 2:06.2, which was Dan Wells' lap time. Now for the reigning champion, Chris van der Drift, unfortunately for him, they suffered a little bit of a setback. 2 red flag incidents during that 15-minute qualifying session, and as he hit the line to record a time, red flag came out. That happened twice. They actually weren't classified with a lap time for the second segment of qualifying. Unfortunately for them, the Giltrap team will be starting further back in the field. We're talking about Giltraps, of course. Young Marco Giltrap, the 18-year-old Kiwi sensation. doing a fantastic job at home in New Zealand and also in Australia. He's come over here and made a fairly immediate impact. Of course, Giltrap's are a long-time supporter of Chris van der Drift. He is a well-known face in this part of the world in a variety of GT cars, and what better driver to have alongside you than Chris van der Drift. They of course drive for a man who's just appearing off left of screen there. Anyone that knows anything about motorsport in this part of the world will well and truly recognise Ingo Mater from Absolute Racing, who's just disappeared back behind the pit wall. And he has been instrumental in a number of young drivers coming through the ranks. You see them competing in different levels of GT competition around the world, some of them even breaking into prototype competition. But they have had a big impact on their time, Fabian Fior and Ingo Mater. There is the All-Australian team of father and son, Tony Walls and Jackson Walls. Tony's done a lot of GT racing in many years across Australia. And this time he has an opportunity to drive with his son Jackson. Now Jackson should be starting on the front row. They've been quite quick across the course of their debut in the series this year, and I would keep a close eye on young Jackson. Of course, he's done a little bit of open wheeler racing, whether it's been in Toyota and the Toyota Racing Series, in F4 and F3. Of course, been part of the Formula Regional Asian Championship, competing in the Middle East, been very competitive, spent a bit of time just learning his art, and he will no doubt be trying to impress. But to see him starting on the front row of the grid is pretty impressive when you consider the experience, of course, of Dan Wells. Now, that's a name for those of you who have followed this sport. There he is on screen, right on cue. He is a very experienced driver. In fact, that's Marco Giltrap. So we've dropped back to the second row. I'm sorry, that's grid position number 3. It's a second Absolute Racing entry alongside Passarit Promsombat in the number 19 entry. Now, the beauty of this level of competition with these one-make series is a 50-minute race, compulsory pit stop between minute 20 and minute 30, is you can have 2 drivers or you can have 1 driver. It depends on how you want to run things. Now, with some of the amateur drivers, they're quite happy to have a pro driver alongside. Invariably, they end up being a pro-am entry. And for some of the other drivers, the more competitive, say professional drivers, some of them like to, well, they can't drive alone. I was about to go down the wrong path there. So Miko Nassi, who qualified on the 3rd row in position number 5 for the Racecraft team, he will be racing alone, I'm pretty certain. I need to get on top of this. Of course, there have been, no, he's not. He has Wailing Ni alongside him. So he is one of the entries. There are 2 driver entry. There are a couple within the field where there is just a single driver. We will highlight them as we get on. But of course, it's the start of a new season after a 3-year hiatus. There's a number of things that we need to get used to. It's not just the drivers getting used to the cars. It's a number of drivers getting used to being able to compete at this level. Had a long chat with Andre Couto, who is the driver coach for these drivers this weekend. And he said of all the one-make GT cars I've driven, he said this is so close to the experience of a GT3 car. It is absolutely incredible. He's blown away by just how competitive the car is. And of course, he has run earlier in the weekend. There's Dan Wells on pole position. I'm assuming he is still on pole position. You see the rain is falling, but it's interesting. It's one of those light drizzles that you get in this part of the world where it's basically evaporated by the time it hits the ground. So I'm not sure it's going to have such a huge impact on the teams. But of course, if it gets any heavier, that may create a bit of an issue whereby teams, if they are starting on slicks, are going to have to hit pit lane, change over to the Control Hankook wet tyre. Significant time lost in that approach too, certainly if it's outside the 20 to 30 minute window. Or do you take the risk? You just hang in there, drive the car as it becomes a little bit more slippery, and just wait until the circuit starts to dry, because that's the experience we've had so far over the last couple of days from testing through practice into qualifying, is that the rain hasn't had a massive impact. It hasn't really hung around. At various times it's been quite intense, but for a very short period of time, a couple of minutes, then the track starts to dry. There's a dry line because of the heat and the humidity. Of course, it's near 100% humidity at a lot of the time. That means it's raining, of course. And the heat, we're talking, I think, at 30 degrees ambient temperature at the moment. Track temperatures, of course, a little bit higher than that. You see John Flynn, the area representative for Squadra Corsa, the motorsport arm of Lamborghini, in the background, just getting the thumbs up from the drivers. let everybody know that they're ready to go. A rolling start, which really these days is the best way for GT competition to start. Less strain on the cars, less of those nervous moments where you're on the trigger, ready to let the clutch out and apply the accelerator, get maximum drive off the line. Less opportunity for things to go wrong. So it really comes down to be a matter of Paul Yao, another very experienced name in motorsport in this part of the world, taking a couple of photographs on his phone. The drive off the line is certainly one thing that has caught certainly the unsuspecting drivers in the past in a situation where they can be stalled on the line or involved in some level of incident and just trying to get the car rolling and underway. Whereas rolling start, that allows them a chance to do what they need to do. Now here's qualifying. So it's the position number 1 is Dan Wells alongside Jackson Walls in the number 11 entry. The number 84 entry, Marco Giltrip, alongside the number 19 entry of Prom Sombat on the second row. Car 17, Miko Nasi, alongside, just check who is making the starts, Changwoo Lee for the Grit Motorsport entry, number 63. The D1 Racing entry of Car Say is on the 4th row, the inside of the 4th row, position 7, alongside Benjamin Rouget, who's had a lot of experience in this part of the world, certainly in GT cars, the number 7 entry. Number 9 on the grid, Lee Chang for TRT Racing, alongside Bobby Buncheron, very experienced campaigner from Thailand in the True Visions Lamborghini. BC Racing's Johnson Huang will start the 51 entry alongside Siam Gas Courses Superchai, the Thai driver in the number 71 entry. Back in position 13 is Harmony Racing's Yu Sheng Wei, and the Iron Links entry, the number 33 of Lone Lin Shen. In position number 14, TRT Racing's Kang Jo Long on position 15. Iron Link's other entry, Kumar Prabhakaran, is in position number 16 on the 8th row. The 9th row, Hazik O in the HZO Fortis Racing Team, number 5 entry, Cam Lung Racing's Ma Chin Min on position number 18. Position 19, Triple Ace Racing's Henry Kay, and Philippe de Souza on position number 88 in the D1 Racing entry. Now it's going to be interesting to see exactly what has happened, because I'm pretty sure the number 88 entry didn't complete qualifying. I might be wrong. Now there's a time there, but there was some issue about the car may not start. The rain started to intensify, so all that discussion about it comes down heavily then disappears, it's just gone completely out the window. But anyone that listens to motor racing commentators knows that that's an immediate curse on anything that happens to be going on track. So I've clearly put the moz on things. The rain has really intensified. Now that could see us start behind the safety car, just to give teams a chance to get a feel for how the circuit is. But certainly anyone that's gone out on slicks, and I don't have that information, I'm sorry, I didn't see any change on the way up to the commentary position. By the way the tyres are throwing the water out, it may well be that they are on wets, although they're being very ginger into the corner. And okay, let me just refine that as an Australianism, ginger being cautious. They're being very cautious on the way into the corner. And that might be because they are behind safety car and there's no need to press any harder than they are. We've got a red flag, so I'm tending to suggest they were caught on slicks. And whilst they're on the grid, you could see it was drizzly. No one was really that perturbed about how wet they were getting. So they will bring the cars back into pit lane, quite likely allow a chance for them to change onto the full wet weather tyre, because this looks pretty much like it's set in for a little while now. It was predicted at this time of day, but again, it has passed very, very quickly. You can see from just how vertical that rain is, there's not a whole heap of wind involved in this either. So we might be bringing cars back to the grid. Your idea about what's going on is as good as mine at the moment. I have no more information apart from the fact that it was declared wet ahead of the start of the race. And we will perhaps get an update as to whether or not the race length is impacted by this decision. We have a fairly flexible time schedule to a point. It's not a time certain finish from what I understand, so we may well be able to complete the full 50-minute race. And no doubt they will know from the weather radar as to whether or not this is going to be a passing storm, or whether or not it's going to be a bit more intense. And right on cue, out go the run of Hankook tyres. course, the groove tyres, that's your wet weather tyre. Slick tyre is just that. There's Hancock's Hongsik John walking out to the circuit. And Andre Couteau's experience, certainly as a former Macau winner, he has been able to jump in the car early in the weekend and set a benchmark time, which is traditionally what the pro driver, that is driver coaching, will do for the lesser experienced drivers, to give them a bit of an idea on where they can run to. It allows data for the engineers. Again, new tyres, new circuit to a point, the Evo 2 Huracan Super Trofeo. All these things need to be considered, so it becomes a chance to build some important data. You want a pro driver in the car because that data's there. I'm not sure on the dynamic of sharing data from the engineers between cars. Often in these one-make series that are very successful, they allow sharing between the various teams. If they don't have that, by having a pro driver in the car early in the weekend, when the conditions are either dry or wet, doesn't matter what it is, they can amass an amount of data, then pass that on to other teams and give the drivers a chance to understand where they are on the circuit. One of the things that Andre Couteau said to me earlier when I was talking to he and Ian Geeky, who is assisting the top speed team, who are involved very heavily, of course, in Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia, they were talking about the new car and just how good it is as a race car, because it's not a full-spec GT3 car. Performance-wise, it's very, very close. Still runs the 5.2-litre mid-mounted V10 engine. Still is the platform of the Lamborghini Huracan. Much of the aero is the same. Rear wing's different. But Andre Couteau said, look, the ride height is a little bit higher, so it does move around a little bit more in the corners, but you have ABS, you have traction control. The ABS settings, I think there were 8 different settings on ABS. Traction control is so good that it is variable and allows the amateur drivers to be more comfortable. And the success of these categories, of course, isn't the pro driver. If you're a pro driver, ultimately you want to get your backside into a GT3 car. But if you're an amateur driver and you're really serious about your racing, this is a perfect fit, because not only do you have a chance to drive a car that does very much most of the things that a GT3 car will do, you can drive with a pro driver. So you can have your Pro-Am style setup, and they will allow you to get a better feel for the car. They can help you increase your performance as a driver and progress with your development, because you're overlaying data, you're getting driver feedback, you're driving the same car on the same tyre on the same day, and the pro driver can tell you, right, you can brake later here, let's overlay our data, see how much further I go, and all those sorts of things. And talking braking, one of the things that Andre Couteau said to me was that this car is impressive. He said you will find that none of the amateur drivers certainly, will actually be able to reach the performance and the limit of the brakes on these cars. They are just so good. The ABS is just so good. He said you'll be unlikely to see drivers locking brakes or doing anything silly, because they just stop so well. And if you really want to get to the limit, he said you'll extract a lot out of the car. But he said amateur drivers, that's not what it is intended to do. It's allowing them to feel comfortable. So he said it's a real thoroughbred racing experience, one of the best one-make categories he said he's ever driven. And it allows both the professional driver, like he is, of course, a former Macau Grand Prix winner, alongside some of the amateur drivers, to actually get a really good feel. That is proper coming down now. That is a serious wet race, and I think even though we're talking about it, this is the longest it has rained over the last couple of days, but certainly during a session for Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia. But this could potentially see wet race all the way through. They are delaying the start, and of course they've put the cars all onto wet tyres. It's likely, if suddenly it does become very, very dry, talking temperatures ambient in the low 30s, that if the track condition does change, you've got, well, 20 minutes of racing potentially, provided we go full 50-minute race distance for the track to dry, and they can make that decision when they come in for their compulsory pit stop. Now, when we're talking compulsory pit stops, again, it's a 50-minute race, assuming we go full length. Drivers must pit. It's a compulsory pit stop. There is no second guessing between minute 20 and minute 30. So the pit window opens 20 minutes after race start. Pit window closes 30 minutes after race start. You have to commit your pit stop during that period. Typically, the pro drivers will go as far into that window as they can before they stop, to limit the amount of time that the AM driver is behind the wheel. reverse, obviously, if the AM driver starts, then they will go potentially the shorter distance, get the pro in as quickly as they can to get them out there and chasing a position. The 2-driver pit stop, interestingly, is a minimum timed, of course, 85 seconds. The reason for that, of course, is if you come in, you want to allow the driver to get out safely. They're not refueling, they're not changing tyres, they're not making modifications to the car apart from strapping the driver in and out. The chance to do that safely is an 85-second window. If you're a solo driver, of course, you're race ready, you're ready to go. You kind of have some level of advantage. I suppose that's not a random thing, that's a reality. You have some level of idea on track condition, grip level, tyre level, all those sorts of things. So you're not going out green, spending that first lap sort of not quite wobbling around, but just getting yourself up to speed to be able to mix it with the other drivers. Even the pro drivers have got to get that initial feel. All right, how much tyre do I have? How much grip do I have? How late can I brake? How much turn do I have on the tyre? All those things they have to pick up as quickly as humanly possible, and obviously the pro driver will do that at a lot faster speed than the amateur driver will. So they're actually making the solo driver stop for 88 seconds. So there's a 3-second advantage on the single driver, or sorry, on the 2-driver lineups as opposed to the single drivers. And if we go back to the number of drivers that have number of cars rather, that have single driver entries, it is Kah Hing Se in the number 28 D1 Racing entry from Hong Kong. Well, he is a Hong Kong-based driver. He is running alone. So is Kumar Prabhakaran, and apologies until I get all the names down pat, the Malaysian driver, bronze-rated driver. He is also in the Iron Lynx entry, black and green trim entry. There's Iron Lynx running out of Italy. Bit of an offshoot, or part of a hangover from the Triple F racing team that was based here, Sean Fu and Andrea Caldarelli, for many, many years out of Shanghai. Of course, Triple F Racing had a big history with the Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia Series over many, many years. So the Iron Lynx team has a loose relationship with what was left of that team back from a number of years ago, pre-COVID, because that's a whole period that we understand. So Kumar is running alone. He is a single driver entry. Super Chai, the Thai driver for Siam Gas Course, the orange entry, the number 71. He is a single driver. And of course, Bobby Buncharon, Sutiluk Buncharon, the other Thai driver in the number 78 True Visions Motorsports entry. So there are 4 teams that are currently single driver entries. And I say that because I'm not 100% sure what's going on now. Henry Kay is listed as having started the number 91 car down in position number 19. Now, you wouldn't have seen any vision. I was going to say anyone that saw qualifying. Of course, unless you're at the circuit, you would not have seen qualifying. The number 91 entry had an issue on the, well, I suppose it sort of started on the exit of turn 3. Ran a little bit wide. Whether he lost the front or the back stepped out, he got a little bit too high on the curb. It threw him across the circuit and into the Armco on the inside of the circuit. Did a little bit of serious damage to the left rear of the car. Now the 88 entry, which had also qualified, for some reason was suddenly available. The driver may well have qualified and for one reason or another not have been able to compete in the race. So the 88 entry was a potential option. There's John Flynn in the middle rather, from Squadra Corsa Asia, getting a little bit wet behind the ears. It is proper raining down there now, and it doesn't look like letting up right at the moment. I don't have a weather radar in front of me to quantify that, but certainly they're clearing the grid. But the next thing, of course, is visibility. We are looking from well down the track through the rain to the cars on the front row. Just shows you the intensity of the rain at the moment, but that is certainly something that they are going to have to deal with. So getting back to the number 91 entry, the car was pretty badly damaged. Of course, modern race cars, they are designed for some level of impact, and teams, certainly experienced teams, are very, very good at making repairs pretty rapidly. There's a lot of support from Lamborghini Squadra Corsa. There's a lot of very smart engineers and a lot of very talented teams that are involved in the sport. So they can tend to rally together and turn a car around pretty quickly, but there was some concern it was going to take a little while to repair that car properly. One of the discussions I had just prior to the start of this race was that if it wasn't prepared for this one, then the 91 entry would make an appearance potentially tomorrow, but they obviously had to check just how much the damage is. Now I can see 91 on the back of the car right rear, but it looks more black than the camouflage scheme that the Kay brothers were sharing. So Henry Kay has started. He was behind the wheel, from what I understand, during the incident during qualifying, and that was one of 2 red flags that impacted qualifying 2. So it will be interesting to see whether or not that is an all-black car, which I would tend to suggest the renumbered 88 into 91. That was the more likely scenario. Of course, we have a 6-round season for the return of competition. Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia starting right here at Sepang. Back in 2012 was the first event. Since then, 254 drivers from 30 nations have competed. That's 96 races on 18 different circuits. We're going to add to that list this year too. Starting here at Sepang in Malaysia this weekend, we're off to, well, not my hometown, but you can almost say that it's Australia, for Adelaide at the Bend circuit, about an hour outside of Adelaide in central Australia, just not too far from the great Australian outback. Certainly is a beautiful circuit. Yasser and Sam Shahin. Yasser Shahin, of course, a former Audi Sport R8 LMS Cup champion in this part of the world. I remember presenting him his trophy here at the end of the 2019 season. That was the end of that one-make championship. He's done a lot of different racing. Fully expect to see him behind the wheel of an Evo 2 Huracan when we get to the Bend on the 9th to the 11th of June. Then back to Fuji in Japan, always a popular addition to the annual Super Trofeo Asia calendar, 14th to the 16th of July. Then here's an interesting one, Everland Speedway, which is not too far outside of Seoul in South Korea. It has been revamped only recently and upgraded and extended. So we're looking forward to making a debut there on the 18th to the 20th of August. Then back to Shanghai, where we've done a lot of miles with Lamborghini Super Trofeo over many years. The home of the Chinese Formula One Grand Prix, currently being upgraded and updated and returned to its former glory, ready for the return of Formula One potentially in 2024. That will occur on the 8th to the 10th of September. And then traditionally, as it has been for many, many years, the final round, well, I think basically since the inception of the Super Trofeo concept, the World Final. The World Final features on one day the finals of America, Europe and Asia, competing alone in their own championships. And then, of course, you go into a world final at the same venue the next day. This rain continues to hammer down. So 16th to 17th of November, rather, at Vallelunga in Italy, home to the heart, or close to the home of the heartland of Lamborghini. And then the grand final between all the various series around the world, Europe, America and Asia, at Vallelunga on the 18th to the 19th of November. Of course, we're competing for various championship titles within Super Trofeo Asia. The pro class, it's either a gold driver, a gold silver driver, a silver-silver combination, or a gold and silver solo with at least 5 years of experience in this category. The Pro-Am, of course, which is pretty much the traditional one, pairing the pro driver with the amateur driver, often the owner of the car. It's either a gold-bronze combination or a silver-bronze combination. The Am combination, so either 2 bronzes or 1 bronze driver driving solo. And the Lamborghini Cup, which is effectively for drivers new to the concept, and some of them are new or fairly green to racing. Certainly amateur drivers, and that is determined by the committee involved with Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia. Almost time to have a breather. It's still bucketing down. There's a little bit of angle though on the range, so the wind has started to pick up. Now that will hopefully begin to drive it away. If it could drive it away at the pace of a Huracan Evo 2 Super Trofeo, it would be even nicer, because we might be able to get into some serious racing. But at the moment, safety is paramount in motor racing. That's what it's all about. From the marshals, the fantastic marshals that help us all over the world at various circuits, wherever we are, to the safety within the cars and the safety cells built into these cars. That is of paramount importance. So whilst this is a frustration to any of those that may have tuned in to watch this, The greater issue here is to make sure that everybody is as safe as possible. We want to see great racing. Sometimes changeable weather conditions, and certainly with some of these circuits in this part of the world, you can find channels running across the circuit. So whilst it might look like it clears itself, and they are, certainly this is a Formula One design circuit, the former host of the Malaysian Formula One Grand Prix, and they're fantastically, great director, has clipped us across to a channel running down the circuit. They are the greater issues, because whilst it drains very, very quickly because there's a lot of heavy weather in this part of the world, for the moment it is a matter of waiting until this more intense rain has just eased off a little bit, allow the circuit to drain itself, and then we will be able to go racing. That, of course, is what we've been hoping for. This wasn't the way we saw it returning to competition after more than 3 years. We want to see some serious racing. There's some great drivers in the field. There's some inexperienced drivers in the field. And whilst we're all getting used to some of the names that we've not seen before, there are also a number of names that we have seen before. There's a number of very, very competitive drivers and teams, of course. Absolute Racing, one of the most competitive teams in the Asian region. They've competed in European Le Mans. They've competed in all sorts of major championships around the world outside of Asia, as well as being mainstays for the various one-make and GT competitions in this part of the world. Of course, a number of these drivers and teams will head to Thailand next weekend for the first round of the Fanatec GT World Challenge, powered by AWS. I'm sorry, that doesn't roll off the tongue as easily as I would like it to. Certainly not as easily as Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia, but that will be the kick-off for the return of that championship back in Asia, a 6-round season, just like Super Trofeo Asia. So a number of drivers in this part of the world really starting to get their teeth back into competition. A lot of it kicked off, of course, with the what used to be annual. It too, it had a 3-year hiatus. In fact, no, it didn't. I think it had a 6-year hiatus. It was the Sepang 12-hour, just a month or so back, right here at Sepang International Circuit. It was only an 8-hour race. There's a number of reasons for that, but certainly that was an interesting way for the return of motorsport in this part of the world to begin. So 10-minute board will be showed as soon as the conditions allow. So yeah, we've kind of predicted exactly what's going on. It is really about safety and the high amount of water sitting on the circuit. Once that starts to drain, the circuit will dry off very, very quickly. Again, it's a Herman Tilke designed Formula One circuit. Drainage was important. The elevation of the circuit and the way it does drain water has also been designed to make sure that in conditions like this, it does become, well, a raceable surface. I'm not sure raceable is a word, but there you go, a raceable surface. So that's what we are looking for. Let's get a little bit more into what we're looking at with the bulk of this championship for this year. So the format of racing is 2 60-minute free practice sessions. That usually happens, well, there's testing. There's been, I think, 2 to 4 hours of testing on Thursday, 2 60-minute practice sessions on Friday. This morning we saw 2 15-minute qualifying sessions. So again, that is if you're a 2-driver combination. Clearly one driver will qualify in session 1, the other driver will qualify in session 2. If you're a single driver combination, then you will qualify in both sessions, because session 1 will set the grid for race 1. Session 2, as I understand it, I apologise if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, session 2 will set the grid for race number 2. There's 2 50-minute races with a mandatory pit stop between minute 20 and 30 after the official start. The rolling starts, and the full course yellow means drivers must slow down to 80 kilometres per hour with no overtaking, and they must maintain distance. And of course they can register all of those sorts of things with the data, and in many cases in race control. So there's no chance that you can do the wrong thing during those sessions, because the penalty for doing that will be worse than the any potential gain you might make. It's not the way these things are run. Now, it looks very much to me like the rain has eased quite significantly. We can see quite clearly from the camera down in turn 1 that the grid is a little clearer. It's still falling, just not as heavily as it was before. So we might be in for a little bit of racing before we get too much further down the track. Point scoring, kind of the traditional 15, 12, 10, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for the top 10, with an extra point for whoever sets pole for each class. Must take the checkered flag to be classified. So if you stop before the checkered flag, you're considered a DNC, and did not classify. Half points awarded. If the leader completes more than 2 laps, we haven't had a single lap outside of the warm-up lap. We certainly need to be doing one of those shortly. And less than 75% of full race time. Just going through some more of these notes just to get ourselves up to speed. I've got a little bit of background on the drivers, but I think before we get into that, what I might just do is go back to a little bit of pre-event information, just to keep us all updated on exactly what's gone on. So, obviously, the championship's entry is led by Chris van der Drift. He's the leading Pro Series driver and the reigning champion. This year he's teamed up with a fellow New Zealander, 18-year-old Marco Giltrips, who's been very impressive in his home country in New Zealand, but also during a number of outings in GT competition in Australia just in the last couple of months. He's part of the Giltrap family, of course, who synonymous with motorsport, certainly in New Zealand, have been big supporters of Chris van der Drift over many, many years, and Lamborghini Auckland, of course, a part of that. China's Liu Haowen is alongside Frenchman Benjamin Rouget at Vortex Orion Endurance, and popular Malaysian brothers Harry and Haziq O are in the HZO Fortis team. Harmony Racing has Formula 4 Chinese Championship frontrunner Zhu Shengwei. He's alongside David Chen. Now, David Chen's a very impressive driver. He's only been racing since about 2018, made an appearance in a number of different one-make series, and as an AM driver, had a lot of us, certainly we've seen him in the past in a couple of the one-make series, scratching your heads about just how this AM driver is able to mix it with the pro drivers. He's been very, very impressive, and he's back behind the wheel of a Huracan Super Trofeo, and we expect to see some pretty impressive things from him. And having said that, having just pumped up his tyres a little bit, he also set pole for Q2. So we'll see a little bit more of the Harmony Racing entry. Chinese Taipei duo Johnson Huang and Vincent Tai are entered in the BC Racing team, whilst Oscar Lee is entered alongside pole sitter Dan Wells. Now, those two guys have been together for a number of years. I was talking to Dan Wells just prior to the start of the race about this very thing. He said Oscar's coming along very, very nicely. They were running very strongly in Lamborghini Super Trofeo Europe last season, or last couple of seasons. They've been very strong over there and been right in the mix for the world final. So Dan, who's a very, very seasoned campaigner in all manner of things, he's had a long time over in this part of the world in Asia, whether open wheelers or prototypes or certainly a lot of GT competition. He's one of the seriously competitive drivers competing in this part of the world, and very good as a driver coach. So he's certainly done some big things, and they're a Pro-Am entry. Let me just check that, because there's been a little bit of reclassification, but I'm pretty certain they are. Check the number 48 entry. No, sorry, they're not the number 48 entry. And again, another thing I need to get in my head as we get through the course of the year. It'll roll off the tongue by, hopefully by the time we get to the second round, but certainly first round of the year, you're getting used to the new driver combinations and who's doing what. It's down here somewhere. Well, let's check the qualifying order. The number 11 entry, the Objective Racing car, Jackson Walls and Tony Walls on the second position. Of course, the number 21 entry. It's another all-black Lamborghini. Most of them, well, a number of them are black, of course, either carbon or matte black. So, yeah, Dan Wells alongside Oscar Lee. They are a Pro-Am combination, not surprisingly. Oscar Lee is a bronze classified driver. Dan Wells, of course, classified as a silver. I don't think we've got any golds in the field. There are a number of silver drivers. Benjamin Rouget, Jonathan Cicotto, we've got to get to him shortly. Lee Chung, Tony Walls is a bronze, sorry, Lee Chung's also a bronze. So Cicotto, Jackson Walls is a silver, David Chen is now a silver. No real surprise there, very, very competitive driver. Dan Wells is a silver. Kah Hing Se from Hong Kong is a silver driver. These things are variable, of course. This a number of FIA rankings will set the driver gradings from gold, silver through to bronze, but they can be addressed by the various categories depending on things like qualifying times, race pace and all those sorts of things. If for some reason, certainly after a 3-year period, many of these ratings, of course, were set 2019 and prior, they may not actually register as true anymore. So certainly during the course of practice and importantly qualifying and the opening race of the season, or the opening 2 races, the opening round of the season, it allows the organisers to look at the data and say, look, really, they are probably slower than the benchmark pace for a silver driver, so they become a bronze driver. Likewise, potentially a gold driver to a silver driver. Like gold driver traditionally suggests a pro driver at the top of their game, so it's a little bit different. We don't have too many of those in this part of the world at the moment. Johnson Huang here is classified as silver, but he's certainly a bronze driver. Vincent Tai also listed as silver. Marco Giltrap is a silver, of course. Chris Vanderdrift, gold driver. Well, there is case in point. The reigning champion is most certainly a gold level driver in this level of competition, and that is a pro category entry, as is Zhu Zhengwei and David Chen in the Harmony Racing Lamborghini. This is positive, as they're out on circuit just checking track conditions. That may be Ian Geeky in the front seat there, very experienced campaigner in this part of the world, just making some level of assessment as to what it might not be to, and apologies if it's not. Just checking that track conditions are okay. Now, of course, if it's wet and you're going to spin off the circuit, then that tends to suggest you're going to slow down. But if you don't know what the grip conditions are like, then that becomes a whole other issue. And this is where the void between the pro drivers and the AM drivers becomes great. Often we see it with things like restart after a pit stop. The pro driver can do an outlap much, much more quickly than an AM driver. That highlights the voids between the two, and so they should. They're a professional driver. They do it regularly. In some cases, these drivers are paid professionally. That is their job. That's their profession. So they can maximise the performance in conditions like this, or on an outlap after a compulsory pit stop. The amateur drivers, depending on their experience and their comfort in the car, and again, talking to Andre Couto, this car inspires a great deal of confidence, certainly for the amateur driver. It takes a while for them to perhaps build themselves up the confidence to go at full race speed, certainly in conditions like that. So again, this is where mixing the pro and the AM together, you will see a greater void between the drivers on track, certainly for a period of time until the AM driver becomes more comfortable with just what the levels of grip are. And level of grip in the rain is something that you can use a little bit of muscle memory on to a point, because it doesn't matter how many times you've hit a certain part of the circuit, even if you do have experience at Sepang in the wet, one day it may have a channel running through it, another day it may not. Now, this is interesting. That looks a little bit to me like we're seeing Marco Giltrap just on left of screen there, out of the car and walking back to them. In fact, a number of drivers have exited the car. Again, they do have 10 minutes, and let's face it, they are certainly in this part of the world, they've been drinking plenty of water and plenty of fluids. So they are certainly ready for the race. But whilst you're sitting in a race car for, what have we been going, probably close on 30 minutes or so now, and we've not turned one race lap, the bathroom stop suddenly becomes a little bit more of a priority. So it's not unusual for them to know that, well, there's at least 10 minutes after the track is declared good enough to race on before they have to be in the car ready for a restart. And again, they might decide to start, and probably will decide to start the race rather, behind the safety car, so they'll give them a sighting lap, and it's unlikely you'd see the safety car pull off in that first race. There's Dan Wells, not exactly sure what's going on. Well, Dan, you can join the rest of us, bud. We're a little bit in the same boat. Not quite literally, thankfully. There's not quite that much water, but it's very much a let's just wait and see what we can do. So the course car's out there making a decision. We'll certainly hear a little bit. We'll give you a little bit of a breather, just like we'll have, just to see how things are going, and we'll give you an update as soon as we know. So waiting on updates, but certainly things are looking good. Now we're going through the drivers again, many of whom we have seen before, others of whom we have not. Some of them have been doing a little bit of racing in between the last time we were competing with Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia and our return to competition this year. It's kind of frustrating that we're returning to competition by having a delayed start and a sudden downpour of rain just as we were sitting on the grid getting ready to go. But hey, that's life in this part of the world. It's one of the things that you need to combat when you're competing in the tropics. And as we say, the rain has chosen about this time of the day to fall, but it's not been as heavy as this over the last couple of days. So that's been a little bit unfortunate, but certainly we will be racing at some point shortly. We're talking about Henry Kay and his brother Eric in the Triple Ace Racing entry. John Flynn's just about to join me in commentary to give us a little bit more of an update on how that car fared after qualifying, so we can get some confirmation on where they're up to. And also from the southern part of China is Ma Chi Min, who teams up with Australian driver Keith Wong in the Team MW entry. Now, in a further expansion of the collaboration between Lamborghini Squadra Corsa and Iron Lynx, LMDH hypercar program partners for the 2024 FIA WEC and IMSA Sports Car Championships, the Italian team has entered 2 Huracan Super Trofeos in the Asian Series. The first for Singapore's Jason Lowe and Malaysia's Mark Darwin. He's a driver who's had a lot of mixed experience in various different categories over a long time, very heavily involved in motorsport in this part of the world as as a bit of a driver coach and a go-to man if you want to ensure that your AM driver has the best advice to help them gain the best from their performances in the car. They will certainly benefit from Mark Darwin's experience. And the second entry for Kumar Prabhakaran, I'm going to get John Flynn to help me with some of these names because I'm tumbling over my tongue at the moment. He was 4th in class in 2019. Chinese team TRT has 2 cars in Pro-Am. Li Chiang and Venezuelan Johnny Chicotto, winner of the 2019 Lamborghini Super Trofeo World Final in the Pro class. It's good to have him in the field. And a second entry for China's Kang Jilong and Ray Liu, another driver who's had done a little bit of mileage in the Lamborghini product. It looks like we might have John Flynn just about fired up. He's just drying himself up. He looked a little bit like a drowned rat when he walked in here initially, and you can't blame him. He was out there making sure everything was organised. But for somebody who has been involved with Lamborghini Super Trofeo over many years, he's spent more than his fair share of time sitting at home and sitting in the office waiting for this moment for things to return to competition. And John Flynn, it's great to have you here. It's great to sit alongside you. Not only are we mates, we love motorsport. And how frustrating is this? I mean, this one moment we wanted to see. We've been hanging out 3 years to see. Certainly you've done a lot of work over those 3 years to keep everybody interested. Of course, Mother Nature has to have an impact just to make it a little bit longer before we see the start of the first race.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. It's really great to be back with you. And yeah, I've missed talking to you and of course, missed the championship. You know, we ran into the earliest part of preparation for 2020 season, and of course we all know what happened then. And yeah, it's been 3 long years, but getting the championship back together for 2023 has been very exciting, let's say. There's been a lot of interest. It hasn't been easy, but we managed it. We've got the biggest grids ever this year in the history of Super Trofeo Asia. We've got some fantastic competition, some fantastic drivers, and some truly world-class teams out there this year. So, you know, we've been super excited to come into round 1. It hasn't been an easy weekend so far, and Mother Nature has made sure that it hasn't been an easy start to round 1. But yeah, that's motorsport. It wouldn't be so fun if it was easy.
I was talking to Dan Wells earlier, and I said, how does this car perform to the previous car? You've had a lot of experience with the Huracan Super Trofeo over many years in different championships. How does it perform? He said, Sean, it's different. Like we've not driven on this tyre before. The tyre's new. The car, of course, is updated. This is the Evo 2, not the original Evo 1. And the circuit's been resurfaced in some areas. And that's going to actually have an impact during this session too, now that we've had the rain, because the new surface, Andre Couto was telling, in fact, Dan Wells was also reiterating the point, the rain actually impacts the grip levels because it is a new surface. So there's a few things the drivers have to come to terms with. But what the lap records are 2:04.6, I think Afik Yazid said in 19, and the guys were doing 2:06.2s during qualifying. So it's quite close, but we haven't actually had a full proper dry session, have we? Where the guys have had a chance to actually extract the maximum from the car and get a good proper feel for where the benchmark setup would be.
No, absolutely. Everyone's learning. We've got a lot of new teams, as I said, who don't know the car, so they're finding their way. We've got some experienced teams and very experienced drivers, as you mentioned, Dan. We've also got Chris van der Drift, of course, 2019 Super Trofeo Asia Pro reigning champion still. These guys understand the car very well. And they really, as you say, see the difference in the new tyre, see the difference in the update package to the car, but also the track resurface itself. So on top of that, we were hoping qualifying we would really see the pace of the car, but of course with the qualifying sessions also being slightly interrupted by rain and red flags, I don't think we've really seen the pace of the car as yet. So now let's see what happens. I don't think the circuit's going to dry quickly enough this afternoon for us to see the outright pace of the new car, but fingers crossed tomorrow.
Well, we're a couple of hours earlier, or an hour certainly earlier tomorrow, to be able to, fingers crossed, as you say, to find that we get a dry track and a good chance to get some proper running. These drivers are all champing at the bits. 10-minute board is out. Oh, there we go. 10-minute board was shown at 15:25, which is 1 minute from now. So we're only about 11 minutes away, fingers crossed, from going racing, which will be fantastic. Now, we're going to do the full 50-minute quota, or have we lost too much time during this particular window?
I haven't had my radio on, so I haven't been able to hear from race control. But when we stopped the race, the idea was that we would shorten the race length by 3 minutes only.
Okay.
What we also have to remember with Sepang is that we're not so much limited. Whilst we have other championships running after us, we're not so much limited by daylight because the circuit is also floodlit. So there is a potential to extend if a championship needed to. But
we were talking earlier too that we never like to talk about an off-track incident, but certainly Henry Kay had an issue during the second qualifier coming out of turn 3, made contact with the barriers. Have they repaired the car? It looked pretty nasty at the time, but the good thing about these modern race cars and some of these professional teams is they can turn them around pretty quickly. Have they repaired the car, or has that become the 88 entry that that Herrick and Henry are sharing for this race?
Yes, effectively, Henry. Henry was in the car at the time.
Oh, yes.
So Henry Kwong and his brother Eric. It's great to have those guys with us. It's a Hong Kong entry run by Bergwerk and Triple Ace Racing. Henry had a small mistake onto the grass, and you know yourself, it can be treacherous when you're out there, and unfortunately he ended up coming back across the track and catching the barrier. The car's not too badly damaged, but it's more work than 2 hours. So we were fortunate that we had a car in our pocket that they were able to jump into and run for the day, but we hope tomorrow they'll be back in their car. But we see right now slicks going on the car, so the teams are banking on the fact that the crossover time between wets and slicks will be less than the time that it would take them to change the tyres in the pit lane.
Now, what we should, I suppose, point out is we're not going to see this on every one of those 19 cars, because this is a pro entry and a number of pro drivers are starting the car. This is the Dan Wells entry that we're looking at, the tyres being changed on. So he's clearly thinking, I think I can go okay on a slick tyre on this slippery circuit. I reckon that's almost a big call.
Well, what we also have to consider is the fact that because of the type of championship that we're running, we want to make everything fair and equal for everyone. And you know, where teams have more experience or less experience, for example, in pit stops and tyre changes, this kind of stuff, we add a mandatory tyre change time. So if you change tyres in the pit lane, you have to stop for a minimum of 50 seconds. So it's not like Formula One where you come in, you've got a crew of 25 guys, they rattle gun the tyres on and off in 2.6 seconds. This is a mandatory minimum stationary time. So these guys are banking on the fact that if they change tyres in the pit lane, they lose 50 seconds, assuming the track dries. If they change the tyres now, do they lose more than 50 seconds going round on slicks whilst the circuit dries?
And this is the great unknown where team experience comes into play. So again, you won't see all the teams do that because maybe they make the judgment that it's just wet enough, but it's also driver comfort, isn't it? But at the end of the day, like the mandatory pit stop time, the 50-second minimum time, it's about safety. That's why we've delayed this long. It's not about, okay, well, we can see well enough, send the cars out. Are there channels of water on the circuit? Is there any issue? That's why the course car was doing laps, just to make sure everything was okay. And do you think perhaps we'll be starting under safety car, or do you think they'll just do the mandatory lap, pull in, and we'll go race start?
My feeling, without referring to the regulation, my feeling is that they will probably start behind the safety car so that the drivers can do, let's say, 2 laps behind, 3 laps behind the safety car. They can get a feeling for where the standing water is. They can understand the landscape that they have to deal with, and then they'll release the cars as for a safety car controlled start. That's my feeling. I might be wrong.
I didn't want to put you on the spot. Anyway, I won't throw you under the bus anymore. We'll ask some easy questions. The Evo 2 versus the Evo 1, what are the major changes? Obviously, there's cosmetic changes. There's certainly aerodynamic changes, which would probably be the biggest change. And, of course, this year we've got the partnership with Hankook worldwide for Lamborghini Super Trofeo. But from your perspective, what have been the bigger changes between the two cars?
Well, yes. I mean, the most obvious change, of course, is the visual aesthetic of the car, with a very different look to the car. Now, the platform of the car is the same platform that we started with in 2015. And as you pointed out earlier, this is the second evolution. So this is the third generation, let's say, of this car. The design of the new package looks much more in line with our Lamborghini road car DNA today. So we saw a big change. If you don't see the two cars side by side, you're not familiar with them, maybe it's difficult to see, but we see a much more aggressive headlight line, much more narrow lights, LED lights, the same sort of feeling and look that we see, for example, on our Cyan hypercar or our Asenza SC V12 track hypercar, moving in line with the DNA, the new DNA of the next generation of Lamborghini road cars. However, along with that, we get quite a number of aerodynamic package upgrades that, I know a number of manufacturers say, form follows function. So the new design has a new form, and it aerodynamically helps the car to be have a lower drag coefficient, or generate more downforce where it needs to, or reduce the drag within the package. And then also, we make it look cool as well. And I think we agree, make it look super cool.
I think you won that one.
But underneath, for me, one of the biggest changes, and I think for our drivers, and also talking to Andre Couto earlier, our driver coach, when he drove the car a few days ago, one of the biggest changes and the most important upgrades is the braking system. So now we have a further uprated braking system specifically for this car. And Andre made a really interesting observation when I was talking to him about it. Now, Andre has a lot of experience in the Huracan GT3, GT3 Evo. He was racing with J-Lock over in Super GT. And he said, now this car feels like a GT3. It makes me feel like I'm sitting inside a car. It's a little bit more compliant. It's a little bit more forgiving than a GT3, and it doesn't have as much downforce. But that's the beauty of this formula. The cars still have race ABS. They still have race traction control, but they're a little bit more compliant, not so difficult with the aerodynamics. But what Andre, getting to the point, said was that the braking system also feels like that of a GT3. He said, I jump on the brakes, hard as I can push them, the car stops. I don't have any feeling that I'm going to run out of brakes. I don't have any feeling that it's not going to stop. He said, I need some more brakes. I just press the pedal harder. And this is really, he was really, really impressed, particularly by this.
It's funny, I was talking to Dan Wells, I saw him in the media centre, I pulled him aside and said, quick, give me a rundown on your view on the new car. And the first thing he mentioned was brakes. He said the stopping power is just incredible. So certainly that is one thing that the drivers have been able to fare well with. Now, before we get back to track action, thank God, it looks like it's going to happen very, very shortly. We're going to some new venues this year. I'm pretty excited about a return to Australia. Well, a return to Australia, not for certainly for Super Trofeo Asia, but a debut in Australia, and a new circuit new old circuit, but a revised circuit in South Korea.
Right. Yes, we're very excited to be going to the Bend in Adelaide. First time for Super Trofeo Asia to venture down to Australia. very exciting for us, but also very important for us, both from a road car point of view. You know, Lamborghini is growing significantly in Australia over the last few years, particularly in our road cars that are more akin to our race cars. So, for example, the Huracan STO that we launched last year has been massively popular in Australia. So Australia is very much a market for these type of cars, but also I've got many customers buying Super Trofeo cars for track days in Australia. So at the moment, maybe they're not ready to go racing, but they're buying the cars, they're preparing themselves to go racing in the future. So we wanted to come down to Australia because it's a fantastic country and we like you, but also because we have a lot of interest in the championship down there, and we're super excited because the guys at the Bend are doing a great job in promoting the championship for us down there, and we're expecting a fantastic weekend. But also Korea. So Korea we've been to before a number of times, but for the first time we will be the first international series going to Evelyn Speedway. Yeah, just outside Seoul. I was there a few weeks ago. It's been fairly recently revised as a circuit, but it really reminded me of the circuits back in the UK that I was racing when I was a bit younger. It's got lots of undulation, it's got some technical parts, it's fast, it's narrow, it's really epic circuit. So I'm really looking forward to being there, and I think our drivers are going to really like it there. And of course, our partnership with Hankook is very important to us. But not only that, Lamborghini in Korea is growing very rapidly thanks to our partners in Lamborghini Seoul, SQDA. They have a car on the grid themselves this year with Brian Lee, for example, and his teammate. So it's really fantastic to go and see them and bring Super Trofeo home for them.
It's always a challenge when you make a fairly significant change like a tyre manufacturer, but the feedback so far from the few drivers I've spoken to have been very, very positive. It's very, very forgiving tyre, and it's very well matched to the car. And of course, as David Bobby said to me, this tyre was purpose designed around the Huracan Super Trofeo.
Right, so we're using a version of, an updated version of a previous tyre. In fact, it's a whole new tyre specifically designed around this car, as you said. And it's proven so far to be very good. As we see, I think that's Harmony Racing stopped on the grid there.
That's not a great start. That's the number 16 entry of Xu Zhengwei and David Chen. Xu Zhengwei is set to start the car, but it's not going too far right at the moment. And now that's the car that's set pole for tomorrow's race. So we don't want to see any dramas there. No doubt they're just getting themselves organised. Sitting in the weather for a long period of time. It's not always the ideal scenario for a race car, but we'll certainly see what happens there. Does that mean push behind the wall?
Yeah, I think they'll have to push that car behind the wall now.
Start from pit lane.
Yeah, I'm not sure, for having the regulations in the top of my head, whether or not they'll then be able to start from pit lane if they can get the car started. Let's see, but as we suspected at the moment, it's starting behind the safety car.
It's been a little while since we went through the starting order, but certainly Dan Wells, we've spoken a fair bit about him because, again, a very experienced campaigner in this part of the world and a very experienced driver in a Huracan Super Trofeo. He starts on pole position alongside Jackson Walls. The young Australian has done a little bit of open wheel work and done a little bit of GT racing. His father, Tony, has done a lot of GT racing in Australia. They'll make an interesting combination. They're in second. Marco Gultrip in position 3. Prom Sombat in the second of the Absolute Racing entries. In position number 4, Miko Nasi in position number 5. Changwoo Lee in position 6, the number 63. SQDA Grit Motorsport entry, ahead of Kahim Sia in D1 Racing Team entry, number 28 car in position number 7. Benjamin Roger, who's had a lot of experience in GT cars in this part of the world, starts in position number 8, nearly said 7 because it is the number 7 entries, bright blue car from memory. The TRT Racing of Li Chung in position number 9, number 10 entry, and Bobby Buncheron, a driver with a lot of experience in one-make GT racing around this part of Asia, the Thai driver in position number 10. Position 11, Johnson Wang in the 51 entry. Position 12 is Super Chai in the 71 entry. Harmony Racing's Zhu Shengwei in the number 16 entry. It's the car we saw having dramas. Now, what you can't see but we can is the car has restarted and is now lined up at pit exit, ready for a start. So unfortunately for them, they will not be starting from position 13, but rather from position number 19. The Iron Links entry of Lo Lin Shen in position number 14. Kang Jiong in position 15. Position 16 is Kumar. Position 17 is Hazik O. Position number 18, Ma Chi Min. Position 19 is Henry Kay. And unfortunately, Philippe Souza hasn't made a start. Now, he qualified.
He did, yes, he did qualify. But based on the accident that we had previously,
Yep.
that car was what we would call a floating car.
Yep.
So that car actually
Became
became
a replacement
Henry
for
Kong's car for
Yep.
a full season entry car.
Yep, okay, yep, sorry. Just checking on those sorts of things. All right, you're going to have to exit.
I'm going to leave you. I'm going to head to race control.
Thank you
so
for
we
the updates. Yes,
get
you
started
go
soon.
and do what you need to do, and we'll get into this race. Looking forward to it. Thanks very much, John Flynn. Have a good race. It's great to see the cars on track. Of course, we are behind safety car for a start. You see the clock ticking down. Now it's 42 and a half minutes, so we have lost a number of minutes, but well, the green flag is given to the number 16 entry. The Harmony Racing Lamborghini is now leaving pit lane, and they will be a lap behind the rest of the field, which will be a little bit frustrating for them after that slight setback. So this is really to allow the drivers a chance to get a feel for track conditions. And as we saw just prior to the start, a number of drivers in the field make the change to the slick tyre. What will that do to their performance? Well, I can tell you it's going to become very, very interesting once the safety car is off track, because certainly the pole sitter, and I'm not going to be at all surprised if we see that Jackson Walls and Marco Giltrip, two very talented younger drivers, have also taken the same approach. As for the others down the field, well, it was a little bit hard to judge with so much going on pit lane, and we're having conversation with Squadra Corsa's John Flynn. Of course, a very good man to have at the helm of the sport. He's done some racing himself over a number of years when he was a younger man. He's been very much concentrated on the success of Squadra Corsa and Lamborghini in this part of the world, whether GT3 or certainly Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia in more recent years. Spent a bit of time couch surfing over the last couple of years, waiting for the pandemic to allow us to go racing again, and here we are after more than 3 years, getting set for a start at last. Lights are off that I can see on safety car, so that would tend to suggest it will pull into pit lane, and we will be underway with competition. And this is where the drivers will get a bit more of an understanding on grip levels, because it's all well and good to be circulating behind the safety car, but that isn't at full race pace. So they will be in for a bit of a surprise potentially, but as we discussed during the intermission prior to the start, the pro drivers are pro drivers for a reason. This is their job. This is what they do for a living, and they will be able to use past experiences and muscle memory, we call it, so it becomes second nature, to be able to tiptoe around the circuit and get a good feel for what they can actually achieve. It'll be a 40-minute race by the time we get to, well, less than 40 minutes by the time we get to the start line. Race is controlled by Dan Wells on pole. Jackson Walls and Marco Giltrap behind. Two younger drivers that don't have the experience of Dan Wells, and he's off. Low, he's got a little bit taily coming out of the final corner, so he can see where he's going, but remember, he's on slick tyres whilst we have this wet restart, and we're underway with the opening race of the return to action for Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia here at Sepang International Circuit. Less than 40 minutes on the clock. Left of screen, you have the update of track position. Doesn't quite tell you which driver is in the car. We'll do our best to keep you updated on that front. My timing monitor certainly gives me a little bit different information. I can tell you it's Dan Wells from Jackson Walls, Marco Giltrap from Sombat, then Nasi, Chongwoo Lee, and Kah Hing Se. Dan Wells just doing what he can to get the car settled and get some temperature in those control Hankook slick tyres. number 19 entry from Sombat. Absolute Racing driver, position number 4 on track. He's about to lose a position too to Mikko Nasi, who is looking to try and take the number 17 entry around him. Gunmetal grey with blue trim, but on screen rather, on track, Dan Wells is currently leading this race. Now what's happened there? No, certainly from Sombat has managed to keep Nasi behind. We'll get an update on the timing monitors shortly. Jackson Walls trying to look for a little bit of a dry line, not on the full wet part of the circuit. Bit of an overtaking move happening down at turn 9. To the right hand at turn 10. And there is your race leader, Dan Wells. Often Hong Kong based. Funny feeling he's doing a little bit more travelling around these days. Married recently. It's a simulator business, involved in a number of drivers' careers. As a young man himself, he was given a lot of support in this part of the world. That's opened a lot of doors, a lot of opportunities for him, and he is enjoying this return to competition and really looking forward to having a solid result in that number 21 D1 Racing Team entry, of course, alongside Oscar Lee. Updated position shortly, and just see the way the cars are approaching the final corner. It gives you a pretty good indication on who's stuck with slick tyres and who's stuck with wet weather tyres and who's gone to slick tyres. A little bit more grip in the slower speed corners, all the corners to be honest, but certainly in the slower speed corners under brakes with the wet weather tyre right at the moment until the track condition changes. Again, the pro drivers will go longer in the pit window. The AM drivers will be looking to try and get themselves into pit lane fairly quickly. Now that is a fight for position. Rouget in the number 7 entry, Nasi in the 17, and from Sombat in that yellow, red and black entry. Number 19, Absolute Racing entry, back in position 5. So he has lost position. Kahing Say for D1 Racing Team up to position number 4. So he's the one on the move forward. Here is this position for now, or sorry, the battle rather for position number 4. Rouget in the number 7 entry. From Vortex Orion Endurance. And out front, Dan Wells. Now, 2:26.8, fastest man on track in that first lap. So that would, well, I was going to say that would tend to suggest that the decision to go to slicks was a pretty good one. But we don't have a pro driver out there at the moment, or certainly a silver level driver, I don't believe, on wet weather tyres to be able to make that comparison between just how well the drivers are doing. Of course, for the amateur drivers, they will have gone, I'm sure, for the more comfortable option and the greater grip level at the moment being the wet weather tyre. Control Hankook wet. Classification on the Control Hankook slick tyre is the C54, the Hankook Ventus race tyre. That is Jackson Walls, the young Australian. Done a fair bit of mileage in this part of the world in, well, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure he has, but certainly he's a part of Formula Regional Asian Championship, also run by the Top Speed operation. So he may not have done as much mileage in this part of the world as I had thought. Seen the name pop up a lot, but of course that was in the Middle East where it has been campaigned the last couple of years, and he's been quite successful in that, cutting his teeth now in the Porsche One Make Series in Australia, alongside his father Tony. He's done a lot of GT racing in Australia. 6th at the Bathurst 12 Hour, if memory serves correct, a number of years ago. Sure how much driving he's done in a Lamborghini in recent seasons. Been involved in other manufacturer championships in the past, but certainly likes his GT racing, and the way Jackson is competing as a driver. You can see just the drift up that Dan Wells had coming through turn 3 there. This battle over the position further back, it's now over position number 6 between Nasi and Promsombat continues. Nasi in position 7. Sombat in position 6, and it's quite likely they've stuck with the wet weather tyres. Their pace has dropped off. In fact, Nassi last time out at 2:33. Race leader Dan Wells did a 2:24, so he found 2 seconds just in that last lap alone. Nassi up the inside, has taken the position away from the tyre driver. So there is a change of position. Now, what have we got here? That's the 16 Harmony Racing entry, just running very, very wide down at turn 1. Lucky to pull that up before getting into the gravel. In fact, no. I wonder whether there's been some other drama. He's parked to the side of the circuit on the exit of turn 3. That is where Henry Kay had his contact during qualifying, but put an end to the original 91 entry. Now, where is the 91 entry? He's currently shown in position number 9, so he's made a strong recovery. Now, Henry Kay is behind the wheel. He's up to position number 9 from rear of field, so he's doing very, very well. Last time round, Henry Kay at 2:26.9. You compare the pace to the pro driver that is Dan Wells and at 2:24.5. That's very, very impressive. So one wonders whether they've stayed with slicks. I would tend to suggest they've been on the... Well, they've moved to slicks rather than stayed on slicks. I think they may have stayed on the wet weather tyre. So they're getting good performance out of the car. Now, yellow flag, safety car. Oh, crikey. What a return to competition. So what have we done? We've done a number of laps. We've done 4 laps of racing. In fact, we've probably done 2 laps of racing. A couple of laps behind the safety car. And now we are back behind the safety car. I would suggest to recover the Harmony Racing entry. Now, that's frustrating, certainly for David Chen, who's not going to get a chance to jump behind the wheel and complete his stint after setting pole position in the second qualifying session. So let's hope that that car is okay. There's no real issue. We saw it running very wide into turn 1 just prior to stopping. There it is off track. There's David Chen's teammate. Number 16 entry, Xu Shengwei getting out of the car. So that will need to be recovered and returned to pit lane. So we are back behind safety car all the while. The clock is continuing to tick. I'm a little bit uncertain about exactly when the pit window opens, but certainly during the 50-minute race, it would have started at the 20-minute mark. Now, we lost about 3 or 4 minutes. You can't pit traditionally. I'm not sure of the regulations, so I apologise for that. We'll soon see. Now, I'm just seeing a replay on right of screen. We might, which I see. You don't, unfortunately for you at the moment. You may see it shortly. But it's just giving me an indication that number 16 entry had a bit of an incident. Not too unlike Henry Kay, got on the wet grass. So whether he had an issue, was just trying to reset the system, got off the circuit, or whether he's actually in his efforts to push his way through the field, because he was doing quite nicely to the point where he ran wide at turn 1. He may have just lost a little bit of concentration trying to get the car sorted and run wide, much like Henry Kay during qualifying, onto the ripple strip on the exit of turn 3 and just had a spin across the circuit. The camera in the replay I could see was just showing the car running a little bit wide. So that is the reason for the safety car. So can't stop, as I understand on the regulations, during the safety car period. But as soon as the safety car pulls off, it's quite likely, if we have another lap under safety car, that we might see a number of these drivers pull into pit lane. The pros will be frustrated that they haven't been able to open up much of an advantage now on the AM drivers. So that will start to reset things, and certainly from my perspective, and for those of you enjoying this return to competition for Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia, it will close up the field, make for some very, very interesting racing over the closing stages of this race. So again, compulsory pit stop. Everyone must stop for a minimum period of time. Can change tyres, can make that change, but the important thing is to safely make the driver change if that is what you need to do. Again, 4 entries in the field were single driver entries. Those drivers need to be careful that are just jostling for position. A little bit of game playing going on. That's all part of competition. Not to make a move past the driver in front of you, because that can incur the wrath of the stewards. find you travelling down pit lane for a visit that you weren't intending. I can see it, you can't, but I will let you know that the number 16 entry is being taken behind the barriers. Looks like, I think it may actually be the design on the car. Let's have a look at the rear of the car. I can't quite tell whether it's had any contact anywhere. It looks okay. So it could be that they've had some sort of technical setback. There's the crew's watching on. True Vision's entry. Bobby Butcheron's team just watching on down there in pit lane. Not making a lot of fuss about coming out into the pit lane at the moment. Likely some rules about how many team members can be over the white line into the hot pit lane. Doesn't look like too many teams set up for a pit stop, because again, under the original regulations, between the 20 and 30 minute mark. So that looks like Keith Vong ready to jump behind the wheel of his entry. The number 83 Camlung Racing entry, Marchi Min, is currently behind the wheel of that car. The number 83 currently classified in position number 15. Keith spending a lot of time in Australia. It's listed as a Hong Kong entry, of course, that is his native country. But spends a lot of time in South Australia, so he'll be more than happy to make an appearance at the Bend Motorsport Park. Very professional operation. Beautiful circuit. A welcome addition to Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia. It looks like the safety car's starting to stretch its legs over the field. Can't quite see in the scoring. The lights are still on, so they are continuing to run behind safety car. Pit window open at 15:55. It's currently 15:54, and by my watch, 30 seconds. So by the time they get back around, the pit window will be open, but I'm pretty sure we have to wait for the safety car to come in, and just as I say that, the safety car will return into the pits at the end of this lap. Comes up on the timing monitor. So we will see a fairly busy pit lane. Now, there are a number of teams running multiple entries. What that does to their decision to pit their teams, I'm not 100% certain, but certainly the clock has gone past 15:55. Car 10 plus 50 seconds to their pit stop time. Now that's interesting. It's Jonathan Chicotto, I think, is behind the wheel of the car 10 entry. I'll just double check that. That's Lee Chung, Pro-Am entry. So something's gone on there. That's frustrating for them to get an additional 50-second time to pit stop. That will certainly impact their opening race. It's Dan Wells. He will continue on. He won't have all that much longer. So you would tend to suggest there's a 10-minute pit window. So at 5 past, yes, pit window closes at 5 minutes past 4. Dan Wells underway. Jackson Walls behind him. Marco Giltrip. Now, he has dived into pit lane, not surprisingly, to hand over to his teammate, the reigning pro-class champion, of course, compatriot Chris Vanderdrift. It's interesting to watch Chris get behind the wheel and see what he can do in the new Evo 2. Set pole position in the opening qualifying session. No, he didn't. Dan Wells did. They did have the top qualifying position for quite some time. Dan Wells in a great battle too. Jackson Walls right there in the mix. And there is the number 37 entry into pit lane. The Iron Lynx team doing the driver change. That will see a driver change. Well, no, of course they're not. Kumar Prabhakaran, the local driver, he is running on his own. So as a single driver entry, he will be stopping for a minimum 88 seconds. The team just clearing windscreens and doing all those sorts of things. Still the wet weather tyres on the car. As Dan Wells circulates, fastest sector 2, so track conditions improving all the time. Some windscreen wipers are going. Certainly Jackson Walls is getting the spray off the rear of the Dan Wells entry, as is, well, Kahing Say now into position number 3. It's the 71 entry on screen. Super Chai Another of the single driver entries, the tyre driver. As he completed his 88 second, there is the reigning champion, Chris van der Drift from New Zealand in the Lamborghini Auckland entry from Giltraps. They will be right in this championship battle. Very, very excited to see how they compete this year. Marco Giltrap is certainly a promising young talent for the future of New Zealand motorsport. I tell you, the Kiwis are very, very competitive. A number of them in Australia running havoc in the Supercars Championship. Of course, Shane van Gisbergen. And in this part of the world, over many years, Chris van der Drift has been very, very competitive. A number of drivers now coming into pit lane. Another 7 minutes before the window closes. So these leading two aren't going to hit pit lane, I don't think, anytime soon. Funny feeling that Say has hit pit lane. Yes, he has. So that has elevated Mikko Nassi to position number 3 from Sombat in that beautiful yellow, red and black entry. From Absolute Racing is now up to position number 4. Henry Kay, what a great job he has done after slipping up during qualifying, putting his original entry, the number 91 entry, into the barriers on this part of the circuit. In fact, he's made a brilliant recovery, starting from pit lane and starting from rear of field in the what was the number 88 entry during qualifying, the spare entry. As we look at a replay, that is the number 7 entry of Benjamin Rouget. Having a spin. No, it's not the number 7, it's the 63. The number 7 is a blue entry, but that's the 63 blue and purple entry. Changwu Lee in the SQDA Grit Motorsport entry, having a spin in the final corner. Very impressed with Jackson Walls to be so closely shadowing the driver, the calibre of Dan Wells, just 1.8 seconds behind. 2:20 now, last time out for Dan Wells. 1.838 second advantage over the young Australian. Mikko Nassi is 8.9 seconds back. So he's got a little bit of work to do. So he's 8.9 seconds back from the leader, just 7.1 seconds back from Jackson Walls. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do whilst holding down position 3. But another of the drivers who has not yet been in pit lane, the first driver that's been in pit lane is Kahing Say, sorry. He is in position number 7. Yuhao Wen in the Vortex Orion Endurance entry, the number 7 entry, or the all blue entry. He is the first one back out from pit lane. So he may be able to make up position there on Kahing Say. Number 37 entry in pit lane, just affecting their stop. Prabhakaran for Iron Links. As now more other drivers are coming into pit lane. Another 5 minutes by my watch, or probably 4 and a bit minutes until the pit window is closed. So at least gives Dan Wells another lap up his sleeve at this pace. 2 minute 20s, just under 2:19s, gone over the strike. 1.9 seconds over Jackson Walls. So the young Australian isn't losing too much time to the more experienced driver, and I say more experienced driver, certainly this part of the world. Number 5 entry's had a spin, so a little bit tricky that final corner. That is Harry O, on the HZO Fortis Racing Team entry. He's taken over from his brother. So he's had a bit of a spin, just trying to find the limits of the car. Let's drop them back effectively to rear of field with the retirement of the Harmony Racing entry. So frustration for them after finding a bit of good pace, certainly during the opening part of this race. It's on screen, the number 19 entry from Sombat for Absolute Racing, the tyre driver, position number 4, 16.6 seconds back from race leader Dan Wells. Now Dan Wells on track, just trying to see where the number 21 entry is. He's got to be not too far from having to make a decision. Yeah, I would think at the end of this lap, so that he doesn't put the team at any level of risk. And get his teammate Oscar Lee behind the wheel. He's just coming through turn 14. Long run up the back straight. To, I would expect, put himself into pit lane alongside Jackson Walls and Nico Nassi from Sombat, who we're watching on screen. He, just earlier in that yellow entry, he will also be down pit lane, and that would have every driver in the field then, short of the 16 entry who didn't quite make the pit entry for the start of the pit window. There's Prom Sombat on screen, and yes, the number 21 entry, the race leader, Dan Wells, is now down pit lane. So with any luck, we'll have a cameraman down there to record the pit stop. We can see him on screen. Jackson Walls along, well, alongside now, but certainly right behind him. Oscar Lee, pretty quick off the mark, helped the English driver out. Dan will now turn to safely putting his driver in. Jackson Walls did a great opening stint. His father Tony jumping behind the wheel. Pace won't be quite as quick as Jackson, but there is no substitute for experience. And Tony Walls, if nothing else, has an awful lot of experience in GT cars. He'll be looking forward to getting some time behind the wheel just to see what they can do in that objective entry. Pro-Am category, also like Oscar Lee and Dan Wells. Car on screen from Sombat further back. He's heading over to Aniwat in the number 19 entry. There goes the former race leading entry of Oscar Lee. They'd committed their 85-second minimum stop. Tony Walls comes out. Looks like they may have lost a little bit of time during that stop, provided, of course, the 21 entry has not beaten the clock, because that is time critical. The D1 racing team have a little bit of experience, so I can't imagine that's going to be an issue, but certainly it is monitored, so there's only so much they can do. Pit window is now closed. Every team has affected their stop, and I would expect that all teams now are back on track for the closing 16 minutes of this race. There is what will become your race, well, I was going to say, will become your race leader. They have maintained their position at the front of the field. So let's just see how big an advantage now Oscar Lee has. Has Tony Walls come out of pit lane in position number 2? Well, Yang Ni in the number 17 entry has taken over from Miko Nassi, is classified from what I can tell at this stage in position number 3. Aniwat in the Absolute Racing entry, the number 19 entry, taken over from Prom Sombat in position number 4. Chris Vanderdrift, now here we go, position number 5, the earlier stops now. He is now classified with the fastest first sector, the fastest second sector. He's in sector 3 now of this race. So the reigning champion, 2:18.1 last time round. Dan Wells set at 2:19, I can't remember exactly what it was, or 2:19.8, there it is, fastest lap for that car. Just prior to the pit stop, so track conditions are improving. Those cars, of course, did fit slick tyres, and for any of those certainly amateur drivers who came in that first sector of the race on wet tyres, they may well have made the change to slicks during that stop. We will see, but there is the 84 entry on track. That is Chris Vanderdrift. He is classified about 1 minute and 6 seconds, so 66 seconds behind Aniwat in front of him, the fellow Absolute Racing entry. It'll be good to get a guide as to exactly where they sit on actual race pace as it stands at the moment, because they've not all committed a full-timed lap without the pit stop being included in the pit exit time during that lap. So across the line for another lap, 2:15.9 for Chris Vanderdrift, who was shown as race leader. So it was the timing monitor rescoring. So Vanderdrift behind the wheel early because of that earlier stop for his teammate has really put the team in a very, very good position. And certainly Marco Giltrip did a first-rate job during that opening stanza of the race. So that Giltrip racing entry from Lamborghini Auckland is shown as the race leader. 7.6 second advantage to Oscar Lee in the car he shares with Dan Wells. There it is on track. You can see there with that long hold down to turn 4, the distance between the two cars. So 7.6 seconds. Of course, Oscar Lee's come out of pit lane, so his last lap's a little bit difficult to actually compare his pace. Again, an experienced AM driver, but it's all purples. Every sector so far again for Chris Vanderdrift, so he's taking more time off with every lap. 2:15.9 is the benchmark pace for this race. Prior to the pit stops, 2:19.8 for Dan Wells, so you can see just how much track condition is improving. And of course, much like Dan Wells, there is a mountain of experience in a Lamborghini Super Trofeo entry, but certainly on the circuits of Asia for Chris Vanderdrift. So he really is, like Dan Wells, the benchmark for this category. It's no real surprise it is lighting up one purple sector after another. Sector 1, Sector 2, Sector 3 in this lap. All purples, so you'll see it'll be a sub 2:15.9 as he gets to the line. Oscar Lee, 7.6 seconds behind. Jonathan Chicotto shown in the number 10 entry. So he is moving forward, the Venezuelan. He's only 0.8 of a second behind Oscar Lee. So it'll be interesting to look back down the field. There may well be a position change. We should see Oscar Lee fairly shortly. Well, it looks like him there. Let's just check that that is the 21 entry. No, it's not, because the 21 entry's got a white bonnet. So there's your race leader, Chris Vanderdrift. 2:14.6, so not quite a second change. That I would assess as Oscar Lee. No, so Chicotto's got through. So the number 10 entry, the all yellow entry started by Lee Chiang, TRT Racing, is now in position 2. So Oscar Lee's not looking near as comfortable as his teammate. In fact, that was a 2:28 lap, 2:20 for Chicotto. So even Chicotto's well back on the pace of Vanderdrift, 6 seconds. So the lead is now out to 14.4 seconds. There is Chicotto on screen, I'm quite sure. And the second of those two cars, the all yellow entry, should be the number 10. That certainly is your race leader. The Fern, the iconic Kiwi Fern on the rear of the car. Purple Sector 1, Purple Sector 2, continuing to improve his pace. He's not the reigning champion for no reason. He's carrying on very nicely where he left off in 2019. Big part of the Giltrap team's history in motorsport. A lot of very, very fast New Zealanders. That is Chicotto. 2:20 last time round. 2:28 for Oscar Lee. Henry Kay. Well, I would expect it's not Henry Kay behind the wheel. It should be Eric Kay, unless Eric started, because Eric certainly is very fast. Good experience in a number of different cars in this part of the world. Very much a gentleman driver. A bit of TCR competition. A bit of one-make GT racing. He's been quite comfortable in the car. They are shown in position number 4, Henry and Eric Kay. Tony Wall's back in position number 5, having taken over from his son Jackson. Position number 6 at the moment is Wei Liang Ni, the number 17 entry. That was the car that started by Nico Nasi. It should be Chicotto on screen, I think, in the number 10 entry. Yep, for TRT. Doing a brilliant job. He's done a fair bit of mileage in Lamborghini Super Trofeos. The Huracan, Evo 1, now in the Evo 2. Now that was one of the blue cars coming down pit lane. Certainly wasn't the 7 entry. It may well have been the Camlung Racing entry. Let's have a quick look at who's in pit lane. Is that the 83? Yes, it was. So that was Marchi Min. Oh, it's Keith Vong, rather, sorry. Now, is that the number 7 entry going slowly? I hope he's aware that Chicotto's right behind him. He's drifted the tail a little bit under brakes. Yeah, the number 7 entry which was going quite well earlier. The Vortex Orion Endurance Racing entry. Very solid start from Benjamin Rouget. Is circulating very slowly on track. Is now into the 2-minute 12s for Chris Vanderdrift. He's extended his advantage out to 22.78 seconds. Car 10 stop and go for 49 seconds for an insufficient pit stop time. That is horrendous. Jonathan Cicotto will be coming down pit lane from position number 2. They're in a plumb position to score some very, very good championship points. And now they will be doing a drive-through penalty, car number 91 drive-through penalty for an insufficient pit stop time. I think that was saying just before the screen changed. Car 17, stop and go, insufficient pit stop time. Very, very important in this part of the world, or any part of the world for that matter, when you're in a controlled pit stop environment, to make sure you do not cut the clock at any level, because the price you will pay, it's a 25-second transfer time, pit entry to pit exit. That's assuming that you not have to stop. It's getting very racy midfield. That's the 33 entry. Now, where are they on track? That is Lolin Shen in position number 5. Getting in amongst the traffic, because there's a number of drivers here just trying to get around the circle. Look at how condensed the field is. And a number of these drivers are going to find themselves heading down pit lane. The number 7 entry still circulating quite slowly. Now, who is that in second position there? It's the number, well, that's the number 21 entry, of course, Oscar Lee, who is in position number 3, as a number of drivers now heading for pit lane. This has really mixed things up. So there's a bit of a hangover from more than 3 years of not racing for a number of these drivers. They've forgotten just how critical it is to get that timing right. So whether it's a team issue, whether the driver has just got too carried away getting off the stop back into position, the number 10 entry, well, I'm pretty sure they were set for a stop and go. Yes, it's come back up on screen for 49 seconds. That is a fairly hefty fine. 25 seconds plus 49, that really does put you out of the equation. And Cicotto still circulating quite quickly. Not as quickly as race leader Chris Vanderdrift. He was pretty pedestrian last time round. I don't know what he's doing. It was at 2:12.9. It was his best at 2:12.5. Just to highlight that he still has it, the old boy. Fastest sector 1, fastest sector 2, fastest sector 3, all purple sectors for this lap, so he may well undercut the 2:12s, be into the 11s. No lap records broken this time round. Of course, we were talking about that earlier. Afik Yazid in 2019 had set the lap record for the circuit. That at that stage was 2:04.6. We've not seen the conditions good enough just yet to be able to fix that. Come to the line. What are we going to see for Vanderdrift? He's into the 10s, 2:10.8. That just extends the advantage again, and compared to effectively the driver who will be holding position 2 with that penalty for Cicotto. Are we going to see the yellow car head down pit lane, which is coming through turn 14 on the run up to turn 15 right now, as the number 7 entry has hit pit lane with those issues they were having, whether the car's gone into limp mode. There is Cicotto, and is he going to come down pit lane? Nope. Has he not seen the penalty? They're going to hang out a board. Certainly it keeps coming up on screen. He's running the dry line down the inside of the circuit. There's a team hanging out with a board to say pit. Not that I can see, so communications must be there. Some very experienced teams up and down pit lane that know how to play this. 5 minutes left on the clock, but my understanding of regulations is you can only ignore that penalty so long before that flag becomes black, and that's not a flag you want to be seeing, because that means a penalty. Pull into pit lane, and that could be the end of your journey. There's the 33 on track. Now this has been a position change, or is about to be a position change. Oscar Lee. Now Oscar Lee may have got back in front of the 33. I'm going to go back to my memory as to who's where, but the timing monitor suggests that the 33 is in front of the 21, but here's the 21 coming up to turn 4. Unless I'm very much mistaken. No, I'm not. That was very much a Murray Walker moment, unless I'm very much mistaken. The number 33 entry Lowly and Shen for Iron Links. The orange entry with Garfield on the side. I'm not sure of the significance of Garfield. Find out a little bit more about that between races. Of course, we go racing with race 2 of the season tomorrow, 1:10 local time. Things get underway now. Here we go. Oh, this is going to be tight. 63 up the inside. That was 4 position. So John Quant's not hanging around. The SQDA Grip Motorsport entry straight up the inside. That was a massive move. Turn 7 into 8. That was very, very nicely done. So another change of position. Very impressive move. So we talk about it all the time with GT cars. They're not the kinds of cars that you want to be banging wheels with. There's a lot of aero on these cars, and any impact on them is the replay. Up the inside, Lowly and Shen. Taken by John Quan. And now he's all over the back of Oscar Lee. So John Quan is doing an absolutely stellar job. Now I'm assuming he is behind the wheel, because at the moment his pace has been very, very impressive. The 63 last time around, 2:18.6. We're into the 9s now for Chris Vanderdrift. Purple Sector 1, Purple Sector 2. The Kiwi still doing the job. There is John Quan now. Oscar Lee behind him, the number 7 entry. I would assume that's what that is on the left of screens. Back out and running. Heading down to turn 1. Well back down the order now, unfortunately, for Liu Hao Wen. But impressive drive from John Quan. Jonathan Chicotto still not yet in pit lane. Now the number 10 entry on the run down to turn 4. Car 17, stop and go. Now where is car 17? They're classified well down the order. Will Yang Ni, the Racecraft entry, shares with Miko Nassi, who was very solid in the opening stanza of the race. Surprised that Chicotto hasn't hit pit lane. The 84 entry still leads this race, heading down to the final corner as we continue to watch John Quan circulate. This is where he made that great move on the 33 entry. Liu Ding Shen, there is your race leader, crosses the line, 17 laps in the books, last lap for this opening race of the 2023 Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia season. And it finishes, well, it begins the way it finished in 2019, effectively, with the reigning champion in the pro entry. This will be a car to watch all season long. Chris Vanderdrift doing a brilliant job. Marco Giltrap, the young Kiwi, just 18 years old in his formative years. Of course, there's a lot to learn from Vanderdrift, and who better to be involved with. Giltrap Group entry from Lamborghini Auckland. They will sign off, or certainly start off their season in 2023 with maximum points in the books. Start from pole position. That 1 point goes to Oscar Lee and Dan Wells by virtue of the Englishman's pole position, Hong Kong based. Chicotto still shown in position number 2. No, I think he's in pit lane at last. He's just come across the line. I'm sorry for that indication. The timing monitor was suggesting he may have been in pit lane. No, carries on. I don't think we've seen the end of this. Looks like this will be argued out by the officials and the stewards at the close of this race. Of course, finishing results are provisional until cleared by the stewards after the race. Still, I'm seeing the penalty saying car 10 stop and go for 49 seconds for insufficient pit stop time. Let's see. Certainly keep up to date with Squadra Corsa and Lamborghini Super Trofeo, the Asian Series, the European Series and the American Series on the internet, all the social media platforms. We will be updating you as things go on. 2:08.6, the benchmark time set by Chris Vanderdrift on screen as he comes up to turn 15 for the final time. A little bit of traffic in front of him. He's an experienced campaigner. He's not going to do anything risky. Let them have their race. Yeah, he's just backed off the throttle. Comes through the final corner. What he's looking for is maximum championship points. There's drivers in front of him who will have to go another lap. But for the race leader, 17 laps in the books, 18 laps now in the books, and victory provisionally, of course, to Chris Vanderdrift and Marco Giltrap. What a great way to open their 2023 campaign. Of course, the reigning champion, Chris Vanderdrift, in the pro category. There is Jonathan Chicotto in the number 10 entry that he shares with Li Chiang. Still a potential pit stop penalty hanging over their heads. But at the moment, for the Venezuelan driver, he is just going to carry on and do what he needs to get to the finish line and put that lap in the books, and then see what happens as a result of the penalty we're seeing on screen now. That could also be incorrect on my call. Again, race results will be provisional, but certainly what an advantage. It was out to more than 60 seconds, the lead that Vanderdrift had over Chicotto. And what about John Quan's effort? That SQDA Grit Motorsport entry just coming through there. The number 63 entry. Number 63 and Squadra Corsa are very much synonymous. Crosses the line. So what a drive for John Quan. 2:13 last lap round. So he was one of the fastest, but certainly Aniwat in the Absolute Racing number 19 entry that he was sharing with Prom Sombat crosses the line in position number 4, and he did a 2:12.2 last time out, quicker than Vanderdrift, although Chris had slowed off the pace for that lap traffic as he came around turn 15. There's the Objective Racing entry of Tony Walls, crosses the line in position number 7. So John Quan, Aniwat, Oscar Lee driving alongside the pole sitter Dan Wells, classified provisionally in position number 5. Lo Lin Shen in the number 33 Iron Links entry. He shares with Mark Darwin. He did a great job during that opening stanza to put them in a strong position. He's classified in position 6, of course, Tony Walls in position 7. Vincent Tai, the BC Racing entry with Johnson Huang in position number 8. Ray Liu rather, sorry, in the TRT Racing entry, classified position 9. Super Chai, classified position 10. Bobby Botcheron in position number 11. Kah Huing Tsai in position number 12. Eric Kay in position number 13. Great recovery for the number 91 entry. Certainly Henry Kay did a brilliant opening leg to get them right up into position. Kumar in position number 14. Weiliang Ni, the Pro-Am entry, number 17, position number 15. And then you go down to the 5, the 83 with Keith Wong, and the number 7 who had that drama. Are your classified finishes, 18 classified finishes. Unfortunately, that issue for the number 16 Harmony Racing entry, which has pole position for race number 2 tomorrow. Make sure you join us for race 2 of the return of Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia from about 1:10 local time tomorrow. But your race winner, Chris Vanderdrift, reigning Pro Series champion, he'll be very happy to start the season for Absolute Racing. And what a great debut for Absolute. Very experienced campaigners in all manner of GT racing, certainly one-make championships across Asia to kick their season off. Congratulations, of course, from Marco Giltrap, the 18-year-old New Zealander, who did the opening leg of this race in fairly interesting conditions. Of course, we're delayed by upwards of half an hour from some very, very heavy rain. You wouldn't know to look at the track conditions now and pit lane that it was a hell of a downpour. And teams had to just wait until it was safe enough to get back to racing. And they were able to complete this first race of a return to competition. So there you have it. The number 84 entry from Absolute Racing takes victory over a potential pending challenge for a penalty for the TRT Racing entry with Chicotto and Li Chiang in position number 2. John Quan finished a great race for the number 63 SQDA Grit Motorsport entry from the all-tie Absolute 19 entry in position number 4. Then the pole sitters Oscar Lee and Dan Wells in position number 5. Position 6 to the Iron Links number 33 entry rather. The Objective Racing number 11 All-Australian Tony Walls and Jackson Wall entry in position number 7. Vincent Tai finishing off with the Johnson's Wang entry in BC Racing. Position number 8 Ray Liu in position number 9, and Super Chai in the Siam Gas Corsa entry in position number 10. So thank you for joining us for this opening race. Make sure you keep up with all the Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia social media platforms. They will be updated regularly. Some brilliant photography and information coming from the series. Of course, Squadra Corsa's website, Squadra Corsa being the motorsport arm of Lamborghini. And we will be back tomorrow from, I'll just get the updated time to make sure I'm not giving you any false information. I'm pretty sure it is from 1:10 tomorrow. I made that note somewhere just to make sure that, yes it is in fact, 7th of May, race 2, Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia. We might hear from the race winners.
Yeah, sure. You want to come in? Come in the middle here.
Certainly, they did a brilliant job to kick off this season very nicely. Rain delay to start, and then victory to Chris Vanderdrift and his talented young teammate Marco Giltrap. Very, very happy. Chris Vanderdrift, great way to start off the season. Nice to be back. Of course, a great start here at Sepang International Circuit after tomorrow. We're back for certainly to me for back to Australia, but a debut visit to Australia for Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia to the Ben Motorsport Park in South Australia, 9th to the 11th of June. Fuji in Japan, 14th to the 16th of July, as we have a look at the highlights. Looked great to start with. We were all set to go racing, and then down it came. Initially, not too bad, like it wasn't particularly wet, and then suddenly it became very, very, very wet. Visibility very bad, very, very wet, channels of water running across Sepang Circuit. Ultimately, they cleared the circuit and we went racing. And a great start for some of the teams who elected to actually go on slicks before the start of the race. From Sombat having a great run with Benjamin Rouget in the number 7 entry early in the piece. Great fighting through the field as some of the drivers start on slicks, battling with those that start on wets. There's the Harmony Racing entry. Ran very wide here, and that had issues down at the exit of turn 3 rather. And there it is, slipping on the wet grass. Now, whether he's just trying to pull off the circuit because he had that issue on the exit of turn 1, ultimately the car had to be recovered. Now, that's the pole-sitting car for race 2 tomorrow, so let's hope there's no greater issue there. Then the pit stop started. Some drivers struggled just to get the car into pit lane. Now, it's interesting that the 63 entry had such a hassle during that stage of the race. They recovered to finish in position number 3. Now, during the compulsory pit stop times, we were talking about ensuring that they didn't leave pit lane before they'd completed their minimum stop. 2 driver entries, 85 seconds. Single driver entries, 88 seconds. There is a string of penalties afterwards, and one of them is hanging over the driver that was chasing this man, Chris Vanderdrift, who stopped early. Marco Giltrap hit pit lane. There's the 10 entry, Jonathan Chicotto. Ultimately, we were seeing vision of there being a 49-second pit stop penalty, as well as the 25-second transit time. This was a great move as he was moving forward. John Kwan, who we saw had the car had a spin earlier in the session, he made a great recovery and worked his way back through the field. As we came to the checkered flag, the back of that group is in fact the race leader, Chris Vanderdrift, hitting the start-finish line behind some of the lap traffic. He caught them at great pace down to turn 15 and backed off just to come across the line, with the clock having ticked over to race distance. And the lap cars, of course, had to go on to complete the rest of the race. Chicotto took the flag in position number 2. Team very happy, and let's hope it stays that way for them with all the great work they've done. But there could be that penalty hanging over their heads, so keep up to date with the socials and the website as we update exactly how the opening race played out. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for weathering with us that storm at the start of the race before we saw some more great action, as we've come to see over many years. First started here back in 2012. Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia. As we go through to the podium, we'll let you take the ambient audio so you can pick up any of the speeches and the introductions to the various drivers as they win and take their points for and trophies for the opening round of the championship.
Spot. Chang Woo Lee, John Kuhn. And the winner, representing Absolute Racing, Marco Giltrap, Chris van der Brit. It's my honor to invite Mr. Francesco Scardoni, Region Director of Automobili Lamborghini Asia Pacific, to present the trophy to the winners. The winners and awarding guests are invited to take photos. All right, let's have the winners and awarding guests to once again to take photos, group photos. Okay, let's have another round of applause for all the winners. And now it's champagne time.